The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 12 star systems, its crystalline spires gleaming like jewels against the cosmic void. At its heart sat the dragon emperor Valthrix, whose scales shimmered with the colors of dying suns and whose voice could shatter mountains. For 3,000 years, he had ruled with absolute authority, commanding fleets that could reduce planets to ash and armies that made entire species kneel in submission. Yet for all his power, the mighty emperor found himself helpless before a problem that no amount of force could solve. His youngest son, Prince Kairos, lay dying in the highest tower of the imperial palace, his small form racked by a mysterious illness that had baffled every healer, scientist, and mystic in the empire. The prince was barely 12 years old by human standards, though in Zephyrian terms he was still considered an infant. His scales, which should have gleamed like polished emeralds, had faded to a sickly gray. His wings, meant to carry him through the skies of a dozen worlds, hung limp and lifeless at his sides. Most troubling of all, the inner fire that burned within every Zephyrian had dimmed to barely a flicker. Emperor Valthrix stood at his son's bedside, his massive form casting shadows across the ornate chamber. The room was filled with the finest medical equipment the Empire could provide, humming machines that monitored every aspect of the prince's failing health. Yet none of it seemed to help. "Your Majesty," came a voice from behind him. The Emperor turned to see High Healer Nexus, the most skilled medical practitioner in the Empire. The elderly Zephyrian's own scales had dulled with age, but his eyes still burned with fierce intelligence. "I have consulted with every specialist across our 12 systems. The consensus remains the same." "Tell me," the Emperor commanded, though he dreaded the words he knew were coming. "The prince suffers from void sickness, Your Majesty. It is a rare condition that affects 1 in 10 million Zephyrians. The life force simply drains away. There is no cure in our medical archives, no treatment that has ever proven effective." Valthrix's claws carved deep grooves in the stone floor. He had conquered galaxies, had bent the very fabric of space to his will, yet he could not save his own child. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Days, perhaps a week at most, Your Majesty. I am truly sorry." The Emperor dismissed the healer with a wave of his hand and returned his attention to his son. Prince Kairos stirred slightly, his golden eyes opening to meet his father's gaze. Despite his weakness, the young prince managed a small smile. "Father," Kairos whispered, his voice like rustling leaves, "you look worried." Valthrix knelt beside the bed, careful not to let his massive weight shake the delicate medical apparatus. "Rest, my son. You need to conserve your strength." "I dreamed I was flying again," the prince said, his eyes growing distant. "Through the crystal gardens of Nexara Prime, where the flowers sing in the wind. Will you take me there when I get better?" The Emperor's heart, an organ capable of pumping molten energy through his veins, felt as though it might shatter. "Of course, my boy. We'll fly to every world in the Empire together." As the prince drifted back into fitful sleep, Valthrix made a decision that would have shocked his advisors. For the first time in his 3,000-year reign, he sent out a plea for help that extended beyond the borders of his empire. The message went out across the known galaxy, transmitted on every frequency and in every language. Any being, from any world or species, who could heal his son would be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. The responses came flooding in within hours. Mystical healers from the gas giants of Andromeda offered their services. The bioengineers of the Synthetic Collective proposed radical genetic modifications. Ancient beings from dimensions beyond normal space-time sent cryptic messages promising miraculous cures. Yet as each specialist arrived and examined the prince, the result was always the same. They would shake their heads, offer their condolences, and depart with heavy hearts. It was on the 5th day of this parade of failure that something unexpected happened. A small, unremarkable vessel requested permission to dock at the Imperial station. The ship was of human design, battered and worn from countless journeys through hyperspace. Its pilot was a single individual who claimed to have medical experience. "A human?" scoffed Admiral Caretaker, the Emperor's chief military advisor. His red scales bristled with indignation. "Your Majesty, humans are barely more than primitives. They've only been in space for a few centuries. What could one of them possibly offer that our greatest minds cannot?" Valthrix studied the transmission from the human vessel. The being inside had introduced herself simply as Dr. Sarah Chen, a former pediatric specialist from Earth who now worked as a traveling medic on the galactic frontier. Her credentials were modest compared to the legendary healers who had already failed, but something in her message caught his attention. "She says she has experience with metabolic disorders in developing beings," the Emperor mused, "and she specifically mentions energy-based life forms." "Humans don't even have internal energy matrices," Admiral Caretaker protested. "They're carbon-based flesh bags powered by primitive chemical reactions. This is absurd." But desperation had stripped away the Emperor's usual pride. "Let her dock," he commanded. "What harm can it do at this point?" An hour later, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the Imperial audience chamber, looking impossibly small before the towering form of the Dragon Emperor. She was middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wearing a simple medical uniform rather than the elaborate robes favored by other healers. Her dark eyes showed no fear as she met the Emperor's gaze, only a calm professionalism that spoke of years dealing with desperate parents and dying children. "Your Majesty," she said with a respectful bow, "thank you for allowing me to help. I understand time is critical." Valthrix studied her carefully. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her movements economical and purposeful. There was something about her demeanor that reminded him of the best military officers under his command, people who remained steady under pressure and focused on the mission at hand. "Many of the galaxy's greatest healers have already examined my son," the Emperor said. "They all reached the same conclusion. What makes you think you can succeed where they have failed?" Dr. Chen clasped her hands behind her back, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both respect and determination. "I don't know if I can help, Your Majesty, but I've spent the last 15 years working on frontier worlds, treating species that don't have access to advanced medical facilities. Sometimes the old ways, the simple approaches, can reveal things that sophisticated technology misses." "The old ways?" Admiral Caretaker interjected with a snort. "Human medical technology is thousands of years behind ours." The doctor turned to face the Admiral calmly. "Not technology, sir. Observation. Sometimes when you're surrounded by complex equipment and exotic treatments, you forget to simply watch and listen to what the patient is trying to tell you." Emperor Valthrix felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. It was a fragile thing, easily crushed, but it was there nonetheless. "Very well, Dr. Chen. You may examine my son. But I warn you, if this is some elaborate deception or if you cause him any additional pain—" "Understood, Your Majesty. I have children of my own. I would never do anything to harm yours." The journey to Prince Kairos's chamber felt like a pilgrimage to Dr. Chen. She had treated alien children before, but never royalty, and certainly never under such dire circumstances. The palace corridors were vast and imposing, decorated with tapestries that depicted the empire's conquests and lined with statues of previous emperors. Everything about the place spoke of power and authority, yet she could sense the desperation that hung in the air like smoke. When they reached the prince's room, Dr. Chen paused at the threshold. The chamber was 3 times the size of most hospital rooms she'd worked in, filled with medical equipment that hummed and beeped with alien efficiency. In the center of it all was a bed scaled for a young Zephyrian, and upon it lay the smallest dragon she had ever seen. Prince Kairos was beautiful even in his illness. His scales, though faded, still held hints of their natural emerald luster. His features were delicate but noble, with the high cheekbones and elegant proportions that marked Zephyrian royalty. As she approached, his golden eyes opened and fixed on her with curious intelligence. "Hello?" she said softly, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "I'm Dr. Chen. I'm here to see if I can help you feel better." The prince's voice was barely a whisper. "You're human." "Yes, I am. Is that okay?" A ghost of a smile crossed the young dragon's features. "I've never met a human before. Father says your people are very interesting." Dr. Chen glanced back at the emperor, who stood in the doorway with his advisors. His expression was unreadable, but she could sense the tension radiating from his massive form. Turning back to the prince, she began her examination. She started not with the sophisticated alien medical scanners, but with her own eyes and hands. She observed how the prince breathed, noted the rhythm of his heartbeat, felt the temperature of his skin. The Zephyrian physicians who had examined him previously had focused on the exotic aspects of his physiology, the energy matrices and quantum biological processes that were beyond human understanding. But Dr. Chen saw something different. She saw a sick child. As she worked, she asked simple questions. When had the symptoms started? What did the prince enjoy doing? How was his appetite? Did anything make him feel better or worse? The answers painted a picture that the complex medical scans had somehow missed. "Prince Kairos," she said after nearly an hour of gentle examination, "can you tell me about your dreams? You mentioned flying to your father earlier." The young dragon's eyes brightened slightly. "I dream of flying all the time. But lately the dreams feel heavy, like I'm trying to fly through thick water instead of air." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "And when you're awake, do you ever feel like you're not quite here? Like part of you is somewhere else?" "Yes." The prince's voice carried the first hint of energy she'd heard from him. "How did you know?" Behind her, she heard one of the Zephyrian healers mutter something about primitive diagnostic techniques, but Dr. Chen ignored them. She was beginning to form a theory, one that would sound absurd to the sophisticated minds gathered in this room. "Prince Kairos, I need to ask you something important. Have you ever been told about your people's connection to what humans call the space between spaces?" The emperor stepped forward, his massive form blocking out much of the light in the room. "Dr. Chen, what are you suggesting?" She turned to face him, her expression serious, but not intimidated. "Your Majesty, I believe your son isn't dying from an incurable disease. I think he's lost." The silence that followed Dr. Chen's words was absolute. Even the humming of the medical equipment seemed to fade, as every being in the room processed what she had just said. Emperor Velthrix's golden eyes narrowed to slits, and for a moment, the temperature in the chamber seemed to rise several degrees. "Lost?" Admiral Korthak snarled, his red scales flaring with indignation. "What kind of primitive nonsense is this? The prince is clearly suffering from void sickness. Every scanner, every test confirms it." Dr. Chen remained calm, her hand still resting gently near Prince Kairos. The young dragon was watching her with newfound interest, as if her words had awakened something within him. "With respect, Admiral, your scanners are designed to detect what you expect to find, but sometimes the most obvious explanation isn't the correct one." She turned back to the Emperor, meeting his imposing gaze without flinching. "Your Majesty, in my 15 years of frontier medicine, I've encountered several species that exist partially outside normal space-time. The ethereal wanderers of Proxima, the phase dancers of the Andromeda Rim. They all share certain characteristics with your people. Zephyrians are not interdimensional beings, High Healer Nexus interjected, though his voice carried less certainty than his words suggested. We are a proud, physical species. Yes, but you're also energy-based life forms, Dr. Chen continued, her voice patient but persistent. Your internal fires aren't just metaphorical, are they? They're actual energy constructs that exist in multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Prince Kairos isn't sick in the traditional sense. Part of his essential self has become disconnected from this reality. Prince Kairos struggled to sit up, his weak voice cutting through the debate. The dreams, he whispered. In the dreams, I can see myself lying here, but I'm also somewhere else, somewhere gray and empty. Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. That's exactly what I thought. You're experiencing a form of dimensional displacement. Your consciousness is partially trapped in what humans call null space, the void between realities. The more time you spend there, the weaker your connection to this world becomes. Emperor Valthrix's massive frame trembled with barely contained emotion. If what you say is true, then how do we bring him back? How do we heal a condition that exists beyond the physical realm? That's where human medicine might actually have an advantage, Dr. Chen said, reaching into her medical bag. We don't have your sophisticated energy manipulation technology, so we've had to develop different approaches. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. She withdrew a device that looked primitive compared to the advanced Zephyrian equipment surrounding them. It was little more than a modified neural interface combined with what appeared to be an old-fashioned meditation headset. Several of the alien physicians actually scoffed at its appearance. This is a consciousness anchor, Dr. Chen explained. I developed it while treating the phase dancers. It doesn't try to force a displaced consciousness back into normal space. Instead, it provides a gentle guidance system, like a lighthouse for lost souls. You want to connect my son to that thing? The Emperor's voice carried a dangerous edge. Not connect, guide. The device doesn't actually touch the prince's mind. It simply broadcasts a specific frequency pattern that can help a displaced consciousness find its way home. Think of it as throwing a rope to someone who's fallen into a deep well. Dr. Chen could see the skepticism in every face around her, but she also sensed something else. The desperate hope of a father who had run out of options. She knelt beside Prince Kiros's bed, her voice gentle but urgent. The choice is yours, Prince. This might not work. But if I'm right, if part of you really is lost in null space, then every moment we wait makes it harder for you to find your way back. The young dragon looked up at his father with eyes that seemed far too old for his age. Father, I can feel myself fading. In the gray place, I'm forgetting things. I forgot Mother's voice yesterday. I don't want to forget any more. Emperor Valthrix closed his eyes, his massive shoulders sagging under the weight of impossible choices. When he opened them again, his voice was barely audible. Do it. Dr. Chen worked quickly but carefully, calibrating the consciousness anchor to emit the specific frequency patterns she had learned during her years on the frontier. The Zephyrian physicians watched in fascination despite themselves, as she explained her theory in greater detail. Dimensional displacement usually occurs during times of severe emotional trauma or physical stress, she said as she adjusted the device's settings. For young beings, it can happen spontaneously if their natural defenses are underdeveloped. The consciousness essentially takes refuge in null space to escape pain, but then becomes trapped there. But how could our healers have missed something so fundamental? High Healer Nexus asked, his professional pride warring with genuine curiosity. Because you were looking for a disease, not a psychological response, Dr. Chen replied without judgment. Your medical technology is thousands of years ahead of ours, but it's designed around Zephyrian biology and psychology. Sometimes an outside perspective can see patterns that are invisible to those too close to the problem. She activated the consciousness anchor, and immediately the chamber filled with a soft, rhythmic humming that seemed to resonate at the very edge of perception. Prince Kiros's eyes widened as the sound washed over him. "I can hear something," he whispered. Like music, but not music. It's calling to me." "Follow it," Dr. Chen encouraged. "Let it guide you back to yourself. Don't fight it, just listen and follow." What happened next would be recorded in the Imperial Archives as one of the most remarkable medical procedures in Zephyrian history. As the consciousness anchor continued its work, Prince Kiros began to change. His breathing became deeper and more regular. The faded scales along his neck started to show hints of their natural color, but the most dramatic change was in his eyes. The golden irises, which had been dim and unfocused for weeks, began to brighten with returning awareness. It was as if someone had slowly turned up the lights behind them. "I can see the path," the prince said, his voice growing stronger. "It's like a bridge made of starlight. I'm walking across it, and I can see all of you waiting for me." Dr. Chen monitored both the device and the prince carefully, making minute adjustments as needed. This was the critical phase, when a displaced consciousness attempted to fully reconnect with its physical form. Too much pressure could traumatize the returning psyche. Too little, and the connection might fail to stabilize. "That's it," she murmured encouragingly. "Take your time. You've been away for a while, so it might feel strange at first. Just focus on my voice and let yourself come home." 20 minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the gentle humming of the consciousness anchor. Then suddenly, Prince Kiros gasped and sat bolt upright in bed. His scales blazed with restored color, and his wings spread wide with renewed strength. Most remarkably of all, a small flame danced between his clawed fingers as his internal fire roared back to life. "Father!" he cried, launching himself from the bed into Emperor Valthrix's waiting arms. "I'm back! I'm really back!" The reunion between father and son brought tears to even the most hardened warriors in the room. Dr. Chen quietly deactivated the consciousness anchor and began packing her equipment, but Emperor Valthrix's voice stopped her. "Dr. Chen." His words carried a weight of gratitude that seemed to fill the entire chamber. "You have given me back my son. Name your reward, anything within my power to grant, and it shall be yours." The human doctor looked up at the mighty emperor and smiled. "Your Majesty, there is something I would like to discuss with you, but it's not a reward for myself." "Speak." Dr. Chen gestured toward the sophisticated medical equipment that filled the chamber. "You have incredible technology here, far beyond anything humans have developed. But your medical training focuses almost exclusively on Zephyrian physiology. With your permission, I'd like to propose an exchange program." "What kind of exchange?" "Send some of your healers to work on frontier worlds alongside human doctors. Let them see how we approach medicine from a different perspective. In return, allow some of our medics to study here and learn from your advanced techniques. Not for military purposes, but for healing." Admiral Korthak stepped forward, suspicion evident in his posture. "You're suggesting we share our medical knowledge with humans? They could use it against us." "They could," Dr. Chen agreed calmly. "But they won't. Do you know what humans call doctors, Admiral? Healers. Our primary oath is to do no harm. When a human becomes a physician, they swear to help anyone who needs healing, regardless of species, politics, or personal conflicts." Prince Kiros, still glowing with restored vitality, looked up at his father with pleading eyes. "Father, Dr. Chen saved my life. If there are other children out there who are lost like I was, shouldn't we help them?" Emperor Valthrix studied Dr. Chen for a long moment. In her simple request, he saw something that all his conquests and accumulated power had never brought him: the possibility of a legacy based on healing rather than destruction. "Very well," he said finally. "I will establish the Imperial Medical Exchange with you as its first director. Zephyrian and human healers will work together to develop new approaches to medicine that neither could achieve alone." Dr. Chen bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I promise you won't regret this decision." As the days passed and Prince Kairos's recovery continued, word of the human doctor's success spread throughout the Empire. The story grew in the telling, becoming a legend of how a primitive human had accomplished what the greatest minds in Zephyrian science could not. But Dr. Chen knew the truth was simpler and more profound than any legend. Sometimes the most advanced technology couldn't substitute for compassion, observation, and the willingness to see beyond the obvious. Sometimes healing required not just scientific knowledge, but the wisdom to understand that every patient was more than just a collection of symptoms. The medical exchange program flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Zephyrian healers working on frontier worlds discovered new applications for their energy manipulation techniques, while human doctors gained access to medical technology that revolutionized their understanding of biology and consciousness. More importantly, they learned from each other in ways that transcended technology. Zephyrian physicians discovered the value of the human approach to patient care, the importance of emotional connection and holistic treatment. Human doctors gained insights into the fundamental nature of life energy that opened entirely new fields of medical research. Prince Kairos became an enthusiastic ambassador for the program, often visiting the research facilities and speaking with young healers from both species. His recovery had been complete and lasting, but the experience had changed him in profound ways. He understood now that true strength came not from power or conquest, but from the bonds between living beings. "Dr. Chen," he said one day as they walked through the palace gardens, "do you think there are others like me out there? Other children who are lost and need to find their way home?" She looked down at the young prince, now fully restored to his natural vitality, but carrying a wisdom that hadn't been there before his ordeal. "I'm sure there are, Prince. But thanks to your father's vision, we'll be ready to help them." The garden around them was filled with plants from dozens of worlds, a living symbol of the Empire's diversity. But now, instead of trophies of conquest, they represented something new, the possibility that differences could be sources of strength rather than division. As they watched human and Zephyrian medical students working together in the research pavilion, sharing knowledge and techniques that neither species could have developed alone, Dr. Chen felt a deep satisfaction. This was why she had left the comfortable hospitals of Earth for the dangerous frontier. This was why she had answered an emperor's desperate plea for help. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won through force or technology, but through the simple act of one being reaching out to help another. Sometimes humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or ships, but in their refusal to give up on someone who was lost and needed to find their way home. 3 years had passed since Dr. Sarah Chen first arrived at the Zephyrian Imperial Palace, and the galaxy had become a very different place. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one dying prince had evolved into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The Imperial Medical Exchange had grown from a single research facility into a network spanning dozens of worlds. Human and Zephyrian healers worked side by side in hospitals, research stations, and mobile medical units that brought advanced care to the most remote corners of known space. The success stories mounted daily. Crystalline children whose silicon-based metabolisms had been stabilized using hybrid techniques, gaseous entities whose consciousness drift had been halted through consciousness anchor technology, and countless others who had been saved by the marriage of human intuition and alien science. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the Empire itself. Emperor Velthrix, once known throughout the galaxy as a conqueror whose fleets brought entire civilizations to their knees, had become something unprecedented, a leader whose power was measured not in worlds conquered, but in lives saved. Dr. Chen stood on the observation deck of the newest medical research vessel, the Harmony, watching as it approached a system on the very edge of explored space. The ship was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining Zephyrian energy shielding technology with human modular design principles. Its hull gleamed with the distinctive green and gold of the Imperial Medical Service, but its purpose was entirely peaceful. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler colony," announced Lieutenant Commander Torres, a human officer who served as the ship's medical coordinator. "Multiple casualties from some kind of metabolic cascade failure. The local medics are requesting immediate assistance." "Understood. Signal Emperor Velthrix that we're responding to an emergency, and prep the emergency medical team for immediate deployment." The response team that assembled in the ship's main medical bay would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Leading the team was Dr. Synthesis, a Zephyrian healer whose scales shimmered with the silver markings of the Imperial Medical Service. Working alongside him were Dr. Martinez, a human specialist in xenobiological disorders, and healer Christhane, a member of the Silicon Collective whose crystalline form contained centuries of accumulated medical knowledge. But the most important member of the team was Prince Kairos himself. Now 15 by human standards, the prince had grown into a magnificent young dragon whose scales gleamed with the deep emerald of Zephyrian royalty. But his true beauty lay not in his physical form, but in the compassion that radiated from his golden eyes. The experience of being lost in null space had left him with an extraordinary ability to connect with beings who were suffering or displaced. "What's the situation?" Prince Kairos asked as he secured his medical harness. Despite his youth, he wore the insignia of a full medical officer, a rank he had earned through years of dedicated study and fieldwork. "Unknown pathogen affecting the colony's energy-based life forms," Dr. Synthesis reported. "Symptoms include consciousness fragmentation and metabolic shutdown. The local doctors are completely baffled." The prince nodded grimly. He had seen similar cases before, and they never got easier. "Dr. Chen, do you think we're dealing with another dimensional displacement scenario?" Dr. Chen, now wearing the distinctive white and gold robes of the chief medical director, considered the question carefully. "Possibly, or it could be a new variant of something we've encountered before. We won't know until we examine the patients directly." The journey to Kepler Colony took 6 hours at maximum warp, but it felt like an eternity to the medical team. When they finally arrived, they found a settlement in chaos. The colony was home to a mixed population of humans, Zephyrians, and Luminar, a species of beings made of living light. It was the Luminar who were suffering from the mysterious ailment. Colony Administrator Williams, a weathered human woman with the calloused hands of a frontier settler, met them at the landing platform. Her face was etched with worry and exhaustion. "Thank the stars you're here," she said, barely pausing for formal greetings. "It started 3 days ago with one of the Luminar engineers. She just faded. Within hours, 5 more were showing the same symptoms. Our doctors have tried everything, but nothing seems to help." Dr. Chen and Prince Kairos exchanged glances. The description matched too closely to several cases they had dealt with in recent months. "Administrator Williams, have there been any unusual energy readings in the system recently? Solar flares, dimensional anomalies, anything out of the ordinary?" "Well, there was something about a week ago," Williams admitted. "Our sensors detected some kind of subspace disturbance near the system's outer edge, but the readings were so strange that we assumed it was just equipment malfunction." The medical team set up their equipment in the colony's main hospital, a modest facility that served the diverse needs of the settlement's multi-species population. The affected Luminar were housed in specialized containment units that prevented their light-based forms from dispersing completely. Dr. Chen's first examination of the lead patient, Engineer Brilliance, confirmed her worst fears. The Luminar's coherent energy pattern was fragmenting, her consciousness scattered across multiple dimensional frequencies. It was dimensional displacement on a massive scale, far worse than anything they had encountered before. "This isn't a natural phenomenon," Prince Kairos observed as he studied the readouts. "The displacement pattern is too uniform, too organized. Something is causing this deliberately." Dr. Synthesis's scales darkened with concern. "If you're right, then this could be an attack. But who would target Luminar specifically? And why?" The answer came from an unexpected source. As the medical team worked to stabilize their patients, Administrator Williams approached with a datapad in her hands. Her expression was grim. "Dr. Chen, I think you need to see this. We've been monitoring communications traffic in the system, and we picked up something disturbing." The datapad displayed a message that had been transmitted on a frequency that only energy-based life forms could naturally detect. But the medical exchange's advanced equipment had been able to decode it. The message was simple and chilling. "Join us in the space between worlds, or fade into nothingness." "It's a recruitment message," Dr. Martinez said, his voice tight with anger. "Someone is deliberately displacing the Luminar, trying to force them into null space." Prince Kiros's eyes blazed with a fury that would have made his father proud. "They're creating refugees, beings who are lost between dimensions, cut off from their home reality, and desperate enough to serve whoever promises them a way back." Dr. Chen felt the pieces clicking into place. Over the past year, there had been reports from across the galaxy of energy-based beings disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Ships found drifting empty, colonies reporting sudden mass departures, research stations abandoned without explanation. Everyone had assumed it was some kind of migration pattern or natural phenomenon. "We need to contact Emperor Valthrix immediately," she said. "This isn't just a medical crisis. It's the beginning of something much larger." The Emperor's response was swift and decisive. Within hours, a task force led by Admiral Korthax was en route to the Kepler system, while the medical team worked desperately to save the affected Luminar. But even as they stabilized the patients using consciousness anchors and dimensional resonance therapy, the true scope of the problem became clear. "Dr. Chen," Engineer Brilliance said weakly as her coherent form began to stabilize. "Before the displacement began, I heard voices, beings calling from the null space, promising power and knowledge to those who would join them there. They said the physical universe was just a prison, and that true freedom lay in the spaces between worlds." "Who were they?" Prince Kiros asked gently. "Could you tell what species?" "That's the terrifying part," Brilliance replied. "They weren't any one species. There were voices from dozens of different kinds of beings, all united by their existence in null space. They called themselves the Void Assembly." The implications were staggering. Somehow, displaced beings from across the galaxy had found each other in null space and formed a collective consciousness. Rather than seeking to return to normal space, they were actively recruiting others to join them. "It makes a terrible kind of sense," Dr. Synthesis observed as they discussed the revelation. "Beings displaced into null space often experience a form of temporal distortion. What seems like days to us could be years or decades to them. They've had time to organize, to develop technology and techniques we can barely imagine." Emperor Valthrix arrived at Kepler Colony aboard his personal flagship, the Dominion. The massive vessel, once an instrument of conquest, now carried medical supplies and scientific equipment alongside its traditional weaponry. The Emperor himself had changed as well. His golden armor now bore the caduceus symbol of the medical service alongside his traditional military decorations. "Report," he commanded as he entered the improvised medical center. Despite the gravity of the situation, his first action was to check on the condition of the patients. The transformation from conqueror to healer had been complete and genuine. Dr. Chen briefed him on everything they had discovered about the Void Assembly. The Emperor listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "So we face an enemy that exists partially outside normal space, can displace beings at will, and is actively recruiting from energy-based species across the galaxy," he summarized when she finished. "How do we fight something like that?" "We don't fight it," Prince Kiros said quietly. "We heal it." Every being in the room turned to look at the young prince. His golden eyes carried a certainty that commanded attention despite his youth. "Think about it," he continued. "These beings aren't evil. They're lost, just like I was. They've been trapped in null space for so long that they've convinced themselves it's better than normal reality. They're not trying to destroy the physical universe. They're trying to save others from what they see as a prison." Dr. Chen felt a spark of understanding. "You're suggesting we treat the Void Assembly as patients rather than enemies." "Exactly. The question isn't how to defeat them, but how to help them find their way home." Emperor Valthrix was silent for a long moment, considering his son's words. Finally, he spoke. "It would be the greatest medical challenge in galactic history. We'd be attempting to treat beings who exist in a reality we barely understand, using techniques that haven't been invented yet." "Yes," Dr. Chen said simply. "But if we succeed, we'd be saving not just the beings already in null space, but all the energy-based species they're threatening to displace." The Emperor's decision surprised no one who had witnessed his transformation over the past 3 years. "Do it. Whatever resources you need, whatever support is required, you'll have it. But I want a comprehensive plan before we make any direct contact with the Void Assembly." The next few weeks saw the greatest mobilization of medical and scientific resources in galactic history. The best minds from a dozen species worked together to develop new forms of consciousness, anchor technology, dimensional resonance therapy, and reality stabilization techniques. The research was conducted on a massive scale, with entire research stations dedicated to understanding the nature of null space and the beings trapped within it. Prince Kairos proved instrumental in the research, his personal experience with dimensional displacement providing insights that no amount of theoretical knowledge could match. Working with teams of human psychologists and Zephyrian energy matrix specialists, he helped develop protocols for communicating with beings whose consciousness existed across multiple dimensional frequencies. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martinez, while studying the brain patterns of recovered displacement victims, noticed that they retained a form of quantum entanglement with null space. This connection, which had been seen as a dangerous vulnerability, could actually serve as a communication channel. "We can use the recovered patients as living transmitters," he explained to the assembled research team. "With their consent, we can send messages directly into null space, speaking to the Void Assembly on their own terms." The first contact protocol was simple but profound. Rather than demanding the return of displaced beings or threatening military action, the message was an offer of help. Dr. Chen herself composed the transmission, drawing on her years of experience with traumatized patients. "To the beings of the Void Assembly," the message began, "we understand that you are in pain. We know that you have been lost in the space between worlds for far longer than anyone should endure. We don't come as enemies or conquerors. We come as healers, offering to help you find your way back to the reality you once called home." The response came within hours, transmitted through the quantum entanglement link in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of space itself. "We remember the light," the voice said. We remember the warmth of real suns and the solidity of true matter. But we have been here so long that we thought we had forgotten how to return. You say you can help us find our way back?" "Yes," Prince Kiros responded. His own voice carried through the quantum link. "I was lost once, just as you are now. I thought I would never see my family again, never feel the warmth of my father's palace or the joy of flying through real skies. But I found my way back, and so can you." What followed was the most complex medical operation in galactic history. Working in shifts around the clock, teams of healers from dozens of species began the delicate process of guiding displaced consciousness back to normal space. Each case was unique, requiring personalized treatment protocols and careful monitoring to prevent psychological trauma. The work was dangerous, as some members of the Void Assembly had been in null space so long that they had forgotten their original forms entirely. These beings required extensive therapy and gradual reintegration, with volunteer hosts providing temporary anchors for their consciousness while they relearned how to exist in normal space. But slowly, steadily, progress was made. The first successful reintegration occurred 3 months into the project when a being of living crystal who had been displaced for over 2 centuries finally found her way back to physical reality. Her tears of joy, crystalline formations that chimed with musical tones, became a symbol of hope for the entire project. One by one, the members of the Void Assembly came home. Some returned to their original species and worlds, others who had been displaced so long that their homeworlds no longer existed, found new homes among the diverse communities of the medical exchange. All of them carried with them a profound gratitude and a new understanding of the preciousness of existence in normal space. The final phase of the project was the most challenging. The core leadership of the Void Assembly consisted of beings who had been displaced for millennia, their consciousness so adapted to null space that return seemed impossible. These ancient refugees had become convinced that physical reality was a trap, and they resisted all attempts at reintegration. It was Emperor Vielthrix himself who provided the solution. In a move that shocked his advisors and terrified his security staff, he volunteered to enter null space himself using an experimental displacement device. His goal was to speak directly with the Assembly's leadership, not as a conqueror or negotiator, but as a father who understood the pain of potentially losing a child. "I know what it's like to face the impossible," he told the ancient beings of the Assembly during his brief sojourn in null space. "I know the desperation of watching someone you care about slip away, and the helplessness of having all your power mean nothing in the face of loss. You've been protecting other beings the only way you knew how, just as I would protect my son. But now there's a better way. Now we can help them without condemning them to exile." His words, backed by the sincerity of his actions, finally broke through millennia of accumulated pain and isolation. The Assembly's leadership agreed to attempt reintegration, and within a year, the last of the displaced beings had been guided back to normal space. The victory celebration was held on Nexara Prime, in the Crystal Gardens where Prince Kiros had once dreamed of flying. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to honor not just the success of the project, but the transformation it represented. "Today, we celebrate more than the rescue of lost souls," Emperor Vielthrix addressed the assembled crowd. "We celebrate the proof that compassion is stronger than force, that healing is more powerful than conquest, and that the greatest victories are won not through the domination of others, but through the courage to reach out to those who are lost and help them find their way home." Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside him on the speaking platform, wearing the new insignia of Galactic Medical Director, a position created specifically to coordinate healing efforts across species and political boundaries. In her hand was a simple device that had started it all, the consciousness anchor that had first saved Prince Kairos. "This little machine was built on the frontier, from spare parts and hope," she said to the crowd. "It represents everything that makes humanity special in this vast galaxy. Not our weapons or our ships or our technology, but our refusal to give up on anyone who needs help. Our insistence that every life has value and every lost soul deserves a chance to find their way home." Prince Kairos, now a young adult dragon whose scales blazed with the confidence of someone who had found his true calling, concluded the ceremony with words that would be remembered for generations. "My name is Kairos, son of Valthrix, prince of the Zephyrian Empire and officer of the Galactic Medical Service. I was once lost in the space between worlds, forgotten by everyone except a human doctor who refused to let me fade away. Today, I stand here not just as living proof of the power of healing, but as a promise. No being in this galaxy will ever be lost alone again. We will always be here, ready to throw them a rope, to light the way home, and to remind them that they are valued and loved." As the celebration continued into the night, Dr. Chen walked through the crystal gardens with Emperor Valthrix and his son. The flowers sang in the wind as they had in Kairos's dreams, their voices now joined by the laughter of beings from dozens of worlds who had come together not for conquest or politics, but for the simple joy of helping others. "Do you ever regret it?" the Emperor asked her, as they paused beside a fountain that cast rainbow patterns in the starlight. "Leaving Earth, giving up the comfortable life you could have had?" Dr. Chen smiled, watching as human children played alongside young Zephyrians, Luminar, and a dozen other species. "Never," she said. "This is what I always dreamed medicine could become. Not just treating the sick, but building bridges between worlds, proving that the differences that seem to divide us can actually make us stronger together." The sound of laughter echoed through the gardens, carrying the promise of a galaxy where healing had triumphed over hatred, where compassion had proven stronger than conquest, and where no one would ever be lost beyond the reach of those who cared enough to bring them home. In the end, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy hadn't been their technology or their military might. It had been their simple, stubborn refusal to give up on anyone who needed help, and their absolute conviction that every life was worth saving. It was a legacy that would endure long after the stars themselves had burned out, a testament to the truth that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the entire universe.